Fevzi Bilgin, who is the founding president of the think tank, which is based in Washington, D.C., called Rethink Institute, the Rethink Institute, which deals with issues related to Turkey, but also the Middle East. He received his BA from the Ankara University, and he did his PhD in the United States at the University of Pittsburgh. And he has published, he has studied both in Turkey and in the United States. I will just mention two of his recent publications. One called Political Liberalism in Muslim Societies, published by Webpage in 2011, and a more recent book called Understanding Turkey's Kurdish Question, published in 2013 by Lexington Book. As you know, maybe you don't know, but the Kurd community represent more or less 1/4 of the population of Turkey, and is a very important dimension of the component of the Turkish society. I will introduce the second speaker, who is Kerim Balci. Kerim Balci is a journalist by training, and is today both a columnist in one of the leading Turkish newspapers called Zaman, which means the time in Turkish, I've been told, and also the editor-in-chief of a very important journal in Turkish called in English, I'm sorry, called the Turkish Review, which is based in Istanbul, which may move to somewhere else in the United States maybe, but which is a leading review on Turkish today. He studied at the Kosores University, which was one of the major university of Istanbul, and then did an MA at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and I've learned talking to him earlier that he speaks both Hebrew and Arabic, so very knowledgeable person to talk about those issues, and now he's so both a columnist and a publisher of his journal. Now, I don't want to say too much about the issue itself, but since many of you may not be very familiar with Turkey, and I think in both presentations there will be maps, so I'm going to help you to talk to really better understand the issue we're going to talk about. Let me remind you that Turkey and Syria has a long border, 900 kilometers long, and that Syria was part of the Ottoman Empire until the dismantlement of the empire in 1920. And the final border between Turkey and Syria was actually delineated with the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923. So when we talk about the Syrian crisis from a Turkish point of view, we talk about many issues, including involving other countries like Iraq, like the Kurdish communities across the borders of Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, but also Iran, which is an important neighbor, and to some degree also further neighbors like Russia or Egypt. So, and you can see, we're going to get into the middle of the Near and Middle East in looking at this important question, which is has to do with, of course, the Syrian civil war, but also the refugee crisis, which is one of the direct consequences of the Syrian civil war. So before giving the floor to our first speaker, let's welcome our two speakers to Humboldt Baptist University. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Kavestan. My name is Fevzi Bilgin. This is my first time in Hong Kong, and it's really great to be here. I really love the city. I had the opportunity to go around last night for the first time. And it's great to be in this distinguished institution with you today on an important but also dramatic topic. And that's the Syrian refugee crisis. Are they seeing? Yes. Okay. So I am going to talk mostly about the Syrian refugee crisis. I just put the title of the whole conference, but we made a division of labor with my colleague, Mr. Balci here, so he's going to take up more detail the Turkish issue and the issues related to Turkey, but I'm going to draw a general picture about Syrian crisis and what the world and the region is facing. As you see, I'm put this iconic picture of the conflict. A lot of people thought that this was a Photoshop in the beginning. It's a real story from city of, I think it's Hama, and yeah, thousands of people are apparently waiting for food line or something like that. And as you see, utter destruction of the residential area. So that tells you the magnitude of the conflict, that that almost like there's no going back. It may take years and decades to rebuild the country. Just a brief history of the Syrian conflict. Syria, in the heart of the Middle East, was born after the collapse of the Soviet Empire, I was about to say, Ottoman Empire. A lot of countries were born as you know, after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, and Syria is one of them. And the country struggled for a while, you know, had tried parliamentary regime, little bit of experience with democracy, but it didn't sustain. And then since 1970s, it's been ruled by Assad family. It's a dictatorial regime, not only dictatorial, but it's also a sectarian regime. A small sect called Alawites are dominating the state establishment, and because of that, the relationship with the regime to the majority population, which is Sunni population, was always tense. And to keep the country together, they had to basically resort to, you know, pressure and brutality. That happened for about 4 decades, and when Arab Spring came, as you know, all of a sudden, Arab countries that have been governed by dictators for decades, especially the young people, wanted to, you know, basically end these regimes and transition to democracy. They took up the streets, they protested, and at some point of time they succeeded, especially first in Tunisia and then in Egypt through Egyptian revolution. And then people in Syria also got excited about that. They start to protest too, and everybody thought that the next wave of Arab Spring would come to Syria, but then the regime was much more brutal than the other ones, and they start to suppress the protest very, very violently, and then the whole thing turned into a civil war quickly. In about 1 or 2 year time, it turned into a sectarian war, because in times of crisis, usually people take up their identities more important than anything else. When there's no national identity left, and you had regional powers such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iran, basically taking part in the conflict. So, as we approach to 2014, this is like the third year of conflict at the time. Syria basically reached to the situation, to the division that is described in this map. And you see my mouse? Okay, that's great. Yeah, because the writings are very small here. So the red area basically are area still governed by Damascus Assad regime. That's been left from all the country. Okay, and the green area are rebels that have been fighting against Assad regime. These are mostly defectors from Syrian military. Okay, and then the yellow areas are Kurds that dominates the northern part of the country, and the grays are the infamous ISIS that you hear every day. So this is their part in Syria proper. Of course, their rule extends to Iraq too. So it's basically divided into 4 territorial elements, and they are all in fight with each other. So there's no light at the end of the tunnel as of now. the conflict has been very persistent, and it also created a huge humanitarian crisis, the refugees, the displaced people. And the conflict has been persistent because the international community could not find a way to end the conflict. And regional governments basically took up like proxy wars based on their interest and as a political and sectarian interest. UN Security Council also was paralyzed because Russia, as being member of the UN Security Council, and sometimes with the help of China, they blocked every possible resolution to Syrian civil war. And because of that, there was no apparent UN-based political solution to the problem. And usually when there is no resolution within Security Council, international community takes an initiative under the leadership of the United States. That's what happens in many times. And this time, the United States also didn't want to involve in the conflict because it was wary of Iraqi conflict and Afghan conflict, and President Obama basically came up to power with the promise that he's not going to enter another war in the East. So, and that was very bad for Syrian people, and the country is not strategic in terms of all the resources or so they didn't want to take an initiative, and because of that, the conflict grew even further. And with the inclusion of ISIS in the last 2 years, it took another turn. And then eventually, Iran and Russia also, involved in the conflict, and they are on the other side, supporting Syrian regime under the leadership of Assad. So what we have right now is Iran, Russia in one side, US, Turkey, Saudi Arabia on the other side, in terms of looking for a solution in Syrian civil war, and then there are independent elements such as rebels and ISIS and so on having their own plans for the country, and that can be explained in this very interesting matrix of conflict. I think if you look at it, apparently there's nothing to explain, but that's the reality. That's how it is. How the partners, in the conflict are in conflicted relation even with each other. So because of that, nobody foresees a quick solution to the Syrian civil war. All right? And what happens, to this point, if you are an international relations major or something, you may look at power relations and so on and so forth. But then I'm going to jump into humanitarian crisis, which is the dramatic, basically, output of this conflict. So now in modern wars, civilians suffer more than military, and especially this is route, especially in the Syrian war. Syrian people are under attack by Assad and ISIS at the same time. Assad regime is really brutal, and they use all sorts of instruments to inflict most harm to civilians. And for example, they use something called barrel bombs, where they drop a barrel filled with nails in it. Okay. So people, especially civilians, kids, they're all hit by these nails. So a lot of people, because of that, leave their homes, leave their hometowns, leave their houses and so on, and they are just like running for their life. Okay? That's why you see these refugees with their kids and so on. They are trying to basically protect the next generation of Syrians. And then when the regime is not there, then groups like ISIS and similar, there is also Al-Qaeda elements and so on, they take over, and they are also equally brutal in terms of imposing their own violent rule on the people. So there are two reasons why Syrian people are basically running away from these forces to the regional countries. And And also, as you have seen in the first picture, the whole neighborhoods, whole towns are flattened. There's no place to escape or to take refuge, so that you have to leave. There's no food, nothing, no structure left. In terms of wartime killing, about 250,000 people are dead already, and that's a kind of like a conservative number. But more dramatically, half of the population has been displaced already, and 4 million of the 12 million displaced people left the country. They are outside as refugees, and other 8 are in the line waiting to get out of the country. So we are probably in the beginning of this Syrian refugee crisis that has been going on for a while now, and we should expect that another maybe 2-3 million coming out eventually from the country. So just some pictures in terms of, difficulty of going back. As you see, before and after pictures. I just took like 2 examples. There are many if you look at the internet. So that's what happens, like an apocalypse, basically. This is Aleppo. And the traditional bazaar. So it will take probably decades to rebuild the country. And so this is the like a visual situation here. As you see, Syrian Arab Republic, Syria, located in the heart of the Middle East. So the Damascus is here, Aleppo and other urban centers are here. So the war here pushes everybody to Turkey, and the fight around Damascus pushes people to Jordan and Lebanon. Okay, and this is the distribution of refugees among the neighboring countries. And these white dots are refugee camps that house some of the refugees. But all these numbers, for example, 2 million refugees in Turkey, only 10% live in camps. All others live in the society. They rent a place, they stay in hotel if they can afford, or they live in streets. And the same thing is also applying to people in Lebanon and Jordan. So now the refugee crisis took a European turn lately, okay? Because about 500,000 people now pushing the doors of Europe to enter Europe, because Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, these countries are already very much overburdened, and they don't want more refugees. They cannot afford it, they cannot accommodate it. And those who cannot go to these countries now pushing for Europe. And Europe did not develop a coordinated system to absorb these incoming refugees, and now they're kind of like paying back for that. And also they were not so willing to share the burden of the refugee hosting countries at the time. So Turkey, for example, basically spent its own money for refugees, about $6-7 billion. He didn't get a lot of help from international community. He didn't even ask in the beginning. And Jordan and Lebanon is basically sustained by UN help. And Europeans were a little bit hands off. But then all of a sudden they had this huge refugee flow to their own territory. And then the Paris attack happened in November 13 actually. And now, that opened another page in the crisis, because a couple of the terrorists ended up being, kind of like in refugee status, entered France in that way. So that raised the suspicion about, incoming refugees, whether they could be radicals and terrorists among them. So few countries immediately halted, their refugee program. But there are already hundreds of thousands of people located in Europe right now, trying to still push it. So this map shows the refugee flow. There are already huge numbers in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. All right, but people are still leaving Syria, still escaping the conflict and war. They go through Turkey, they go through Greece. You know, they are pushing. There's a route basically. First you reach Greek shores, and then after that you push forward. You go to Serbia, through Macedonia, and then you come to Hungary. Hungary is basically a gateway to European Union. After this, you see this like purple area is European Union. So you push for it, and these are the main entry points, and that's where most of the tension basically is experienced, because then European Union trying to control and stem these refugee flow. And because of that, for example, in Hungary, they built this wall to, at least slow down the refugee flow to the European Union. So it's a small graph showing the number of refugees in Turkey and how they increased over time, as you see, a dramatic increase, especially from 2012 to 2014, after the war reached Aleppo, which was like a great urban center in north of Syria. And I'm passing these slides because these are about Turkey. But I'm gonna discuss this new development between Turkey and European Union. Because now European Union realizes that this is a serious situation. Actually, it's their biggest humanitarian crisis after the Second World War. They want to stop that. They don't know what to do, and they are asking Turkey's help. So they are saying that, well, you have been hosting these people already, and you have done a lot of sacrifice. You spent a lot of money. Why don't we help you? Okay. So you settle actually upcoming refugees in your country, and so they don't come to Europe. It's kind of a little bit selfish, policy, but nonetheless they don't know how to cope with that, and they're ready to give some concessions to Turkey in return for stopping or slowing down refugee flow. And Turkey has been very critical of European policy of pushing refugees back to Turkey and back to regional countries without even helping them or taking care of them. So now Turkish government is trying to get as much help as possible from Europe, so that they can provide education and other services for the refugees. And this is a picture where people were actually walking to Europe from. It's like almost close to Turkish-Bulgarian border. So this is what you have. It's a real situation where thousands of people just walk, and you cannot stop them, kill them, or shoot them. So you can't. You have to do something about this, and that shows the magnitude of the issue. Right? So I'm going to stop here, and I'll be happy to have your questions after the presentation. Thank you.